Greetings everyone, in this video I'll be sharing an updated colour recipe for the Imperial Fists army. This colour recipe will also apply to any Imperial Fist colour scheme, whether you're painting Terminators, 40k or even 30k. And for all you beautiful people that maybe don't own an airbrush, don't you worry your little socks off, as I've also got a quick and easy colour recipe for you guys as well that doesn't involve an airbrush. With that said, I'm Nate the Foil Painter and welcome to the video. Don't forget, if you are new to the channel and you do enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and most importantly that like button. So let's quickly talk about the build first of all. As you can see, I've kitbashed mine right a little bit and then I'm going to get into some texturing. But if you want to know how I've kitbashed this and exactly what I've used, including this copper sheeting, then go over and check out this video where I go over some kit bashing essentials. For the base, this is just a really simple base. I've just used some cork, applied some skulls and a little bit of texture paste. Now I do like to add some texture beforehand, before I even get into painting and even priming my miniatures. And another way that I've found that I like to do this, when I'm using varnishes, I've now shifted over to the Kaleido primers themselves and the new Kaleido paints. If you want to go and check out a video on those amazing products, then go over and check out that as well, because those paints are amazing, including the primers and all their varnishes. But typically I've always used lacquer primers in the previously, but obviously they come down with a downside. So to add a little bit of texture and to rough up that surface a little bit, what I've done is got this Mr. finishing, and these come in different like grits and all that sort of stuff, but straight out of the pot you don't have to thin them, which does give us a unique property to be able to apply some and stipple some on to our models, and that way we can sand them down and add some additional scratches as well. Alternatively, if you don't want to use this product to be able to do that, you could alternatively use something like liquid green stuff or something like Tamiya putty. But essentially I've just stippled on a little bit of this product, grabbed some really fine sandpaper, and then I've just sanded that down and gone in with a sharp tool and just added some additional scratches and dings. And then after that, that's just an optional step if you want to do that. But after that, all you need to do is prime your miniature in your favorite black primer. Now, as I said at the beginning, before we do get into my new colour recipe, I did say I would go over an alternative one for people that maybe don't own an airbrush. And it's quite simple. It's also a really fast and effective way to be able to achieve the Imperial Fists. For maybe if you're army painting but want to follow the rest of this scheme, then it's just quite simple in getting a yellow spray can primer. Now it can be a Citadel one for the yellow, it can also be Colour Forgers, and Colour Forgers obviously got the Valrak yellow now, which is a really great yellow for the Imperial Fist. So it's just a case of priming them in that and then jumping to the time codes below to after I've gone over that colour scheme. Well, for people that are interested in this colour scheme, basically after you've done the black primer, what I'm going to do then is, it's a very strange colour, especially when we're trying to achieve yellow. I'm going to come in there with a pink first of all. Now you can use any pink. I think I've used Emperor's Children. I've used that for that. And I've just gave the entire miniature a coat of the Emperor's Children. Now the reason that we have done it in pink is because immediately after that, I'm going to come in with Tamiya flat white and start to build up some highlights. Now you might be thinking, oh, you've got pink, but essentially after we've done the highlights of the Tamiya flat white, it's going to leave a little bit of that pink showing as though that pink is the shadows. Now something really interesting happens is immediately after we've done the white, we're going to come in with Imperial Fist yellow contrast paint. Now, I've not tried this via brush, so if you wanted to give this a shot and doing it via a brush, you could potentially do that. But I just like the way contrast paint, especially Imperial Fish Yellow, comes through the airbrush, and it just gives you a more unique look. But because we've put that yellow over the top of the pink and the white, that's going to give us some really nice warm shadows and then some really nice bright highlights. And that's pretty much the new colour recipe for this scheme. So we've primed our miniature, we've gone over it in a pink, then we've added some zenithal highlights using Tamiya flat white, And then we've gone over the top of that with some Imperial Fist yellow contrast paint, and you'll be left with this really nice smooth finish on your miniatures, ready to attack the rest of it. Now after this stage, there is an unfortunate, whichever way you want to do your recipe, there is the unfortunate task of going in there and blacking everything out that you know you want to be painting elsewhere. So this includes the trim, the metallic parts, the undergarments, and pretty much anything that's not yellow. So that might take a little bit of time, but you know, this is a sacrifice that we have to make to get those nice blends with that contrast paint. Now once you've completed all that and sealed everything in, including your transfers with a satin varnish, so after that I gave everything a satin varnish once I'd completed the transfers. But essentially what I'm going to move on to now is the metallics, and we're going to do this in a couple of different steps. Now the black trim on the armour, I wanted this to be a really dark metallic steel, which is why I chose the metallic version of the Vallejo black. So it's pretty much a black, but it's got some metallic pigments in it, and this was used pretty much all over the silver metallic areas, but I am just going to keep that on its own, just dry brushed onto the black trim. So the black trim is going to be black, but it's going to have a metallic element, a quality to that. Now after that, for areas that are going to be steel or silver, I've just gone in there and dry brushed some Iron Warriors, and then over the top of that I've added some rung fang steel. Again, I like to dry brush these just because of the microscopic little scratches, and it almost adds your highlights and keeps the shadows in there for you, so it is really nice, quick and easy. Now is a really good time to add some battle damage to your miniatures, and this is where I like to spend a little bit of time. So my mix, now you could go in there and just do some rhinox hide sponge chipping if you want, but I like to customize mine a little bit. So I get a little pot, I put some like acrylic thinner in there, which can be a retarder, which is going to help it stopping from drying for too long. I add some brown, which is basically a copy of the rhinox hide, and then I can either choose whether to brighten it a little bit, add a little bit of hull red into there, or I can just add a drop of black paint as well, just to darken it up a little bit more, whichever mix you want. If you want a light mix or a dark mix, it's entirely up to you, or if you just want to use rhinox hide on its own, you can do that as well. But because it's nice and thin, it's going to flow off the brush really nice, and rather than do some sponge chipping, I decided with this miniature I would manually go in there and paint my little chipping and all that sort of stuff onto the miniature itself. Now the way I do this is to just get a very small brush. I've got an Artist Opus 00, and I'm just going to apply a very small amount to my brush, and this is where you want to pay attention and maybe have a little bit more brush control, because to get these marks and chips a lot smaller. You know, it's something that we add to miniatures, but it's something that we don't really pay attention to, but it can either make or break the miniature depending on how and where we apply it. So for areas around the bottom of the legs which are naturally going to be dinged up a little bit more, or areas that are going to be more prone to scratching or getting hit or coming into contact with other pieces, these are areas where you want to pay the most attention. So it's almost like edge highlighting, but in reverse. So we're going to do it backwards. So just like you would with edge highlighting, you might want to come across some of the corners, but apply it in a stippling. So you're just going to dot it rather than try and get a nice, neat line. So you're going to do a nice, neat line. So it's a good way of practicing. But this way we are aiming to break that line up a little bit more, and you just add some little scratches, dinks and chips here and there. So after that I'm going to get a really bright yellow, and just underneath some of the chips I'm just going to apply a very small amount underneath some to give it that 3D element. Moving on to his head now, and this was a really, again, it's pretty much the colour recipe that I use in most of my videos, and this was a base coat of Bugman's Glow, followed up by a dry brush and a highlight, or even a stipple depending on how neat you want this to be, of Kislev flesh. And I have watered this down a little bit just so it helps with the blending. And then as one final highlight, I came in there with some flayed one flesh just to like hit places that were like the brightest or like the most focal points. So you got a bit of a nose, eyebrows, and because this guy's bald, a little bit on the top of his head. Now around the eyes, I just like to thin some black paint down and almost like a wash, and just let that flow in and around the eye sockets just to deepen them, and it adds just a little bit of uneasiness about it. But this guy does have some wounds and scars on him, and to complete them, I just went in there with some berzeker bloodshade and gave them a little wash as well. Now the beard, this is entirely up to you, whichever colour you want to do your beard, but for the grey one that I did, I just got like a neutral grey and then worked my way up to a brighter grey for the highlights. But that's pretty much the skin recipe. You know, if you do find that the transitions between certain shadows and highlights are a little bit harsh and you want to smooth them out, it's just a case of going back to the darkest colour or the previous colour and just watering that down and glazing some into the head. But I find a combination of glazing and dry brushing is a really fast and effective way to complete flesh applications. At this point now, you should have all your miniature base coated out and any additional details painted on. I won't be going over everything, but if you do want to check out the colour recipes or the additional colours that I've used in this video for the details, they'll be in the paint list in the description below. And whilst I'm down there, and before you move on to the next portion of the video, which is the weathering, I just wanted to take a quick moment from this week's me. So yeah, there's no sponsor this week, but it is from me, and I just wanted to remind you all that I do have affiliate links below with no additional cost to you if you want to pick up any of the paints or anything that you want to purchase from Element Games or any other stores, or affiliate links that I've got in the link in the description below, such as airbrushes and stuff. Then it just helps me and this channel keep continuing to make this work with no additional cost. Also, don't forget, I do feature on the Grimdark Compendiums YouTube and also making courses for their site, and I'm recently next week on with releasing the Emperor's Children course, so that's one not to miss. And there's also episode 1 is free and available over on their YouTube on the 30th. So with all that said, let's jump straight back into this video. So for the weathering portion of this video, I'm going to be demonstrating off some oils. Now you could, if you wanted a really fast and quick and easy scheme, is just grab some Villain Ink Goons Grime, give it a unifying wash all over the miniature, clean it up with a reductive technique, and the job is a good one. You've got an army ready to go on the field. But for this, I want to go over some more and different techniques. So I've got a really dark oil paint, which is bitumen, and for this I'm going to thin this right down into a wash consistency, and this is what I'm going to sort of use for some panel linings. So because we've got that satin varnish on there already, and these dry a little bit more on the matte side, it's going to give us a nice little bit of surface finish variation. Now because of that satin varnish as well, that's going to help with the capillary action, and it's going to help to flow into those recesses. So just work your way around your miniature, allowing it to flow into those recesses, because that's sort of what we're doing at this stage, just a recess wash. And we've got that nice darkish brown black wash, which will contrast nicely with that armour. And then what we do is, once that's given around 15 to 20 minutes to dry, or you can speed it up with a blow dryer, you might notice that you do get a bit of this, what I call bleeding out, where it's almost like overspray with oil paints where it's leaked out a little bit and it's not maybe as nice and crisp into the panel lines as you want, which in some cases does work. I do like that effect on some of my miniatures, but for this I wanted to keep it nice and clean. But because it is an oil paint and we thin that with mineral spirits, we can just come in with some clean mineral spirits, reactivate it, and either wipe it off or push it back up into those recesses and just generally work our way around and clean up any of those areas. Again, just give it around 10 to 15 minutes to dry as well before moving on to the next stages. Now, if you want, you don't have to give this another varnish. A lot of people I know will be jumping in comments asking, because I'm going to be using some more oils in a minute just with the oil dot filtering, but you don't need a varnish. If anything, just let it play and mix in with the rest of those oil paints that we've just done on the panel lining. Now, of course, we've let them dry a little bit. If you're working your way through a few units of these, it's going to have dried before and it won't reactivate too much when we come to the next stage. So the next stage with the oils is obviously some oil dot filtering. You might ask, well, if you're wanting these nice crisp lines, then you're going to spoil it all with some oil dot filtering. What's the, why we're just doing the oil dot filtering straight away? Now, there's a couple of reasons for that. One, if you want to do the nice crisp lines and leave it at that, you can do, but it creates like some nice deeper contrast, because the oil dot filtering on its own won't be enough. So we need those nice crisp lines to start with and give, as entire miniature some definition. But I've just loaded up some different abteilung 502 oil paints like earthly tones and some rust tones and a little bit of dust. First of all, I get the rust and manually go in and actually paint some physical streaks onto the miniature. But then also after that, I'm going to come in with the other tones and just very randomly and lightly apply a couple of dots of that in and around the miniature. Just be as random and sporadic as you can with it. And then once what we're going to do after that is just come in with a clean dry brush, just loaded very slightly with mineral spirits, almost as though you just want your brush bristles to be damp with mineral spirits. So just dip it in and wipe it off on a little bit of kitchen towel. And then in an upwards and downwards motion, we're going to come in and start to manipulate and buff those little oil dots about the miniature, but up and down. So I wanted it to have that streak to it. Now you can go in there just with a mottling and buff them in a circle motion, which will get some nice variation across your armor. But for this, I wanted to turn them more into streaks. And what that does, because we've got the miles on there, it just slightly shifts the tone of the armor, and any places that are a little bit satin will now become a little bit matte, and you just get this really nice transitions across the armor, which of color. You've got all different type of earthly tones and grime effects which would naturally be accumulating on this miniature, and that mixed with everything else and all the previous work that we've done and the chips and everything just comes together and unifies this miniature to one singular unit that is weathered, everything's in scale, and it's got some nice visual interest going off around the model. And that's pretty much it for this color scheme recipe. For the base, depending on what basing scheme you want to do, just paint it in that. But one additional product I like to add to my miniatures and my bases is the use of some pigment powders, and I just lightly dust these around the base and then up onto the legs to tie everything into its environment. So I hope you have enjoyed this video, and again, I've gone over some different techniques for you to be able to take away, and with all my videos it's more technique based and how to apply them and what they do and how to use them. You've got the options here. You can choose whether to skip steps, add steps. If you want to do it faster, shorter, you can do that with this. I'm just trying to give you tools, as I always say, the toolbox theory. I'm trying to give you all these tools to be able to use within your miniature painting, so that you can dip in at any time into that toolbox, no matter what product or paint or color scheme recipe or what it is that you're using, to get the desired results by any means necessary to achieve the look that you want. You can spend hours on this, or you can spend a short amount of time and still get impressive results. And with all that said, that brings us to the end of this video. So a massive thanks for joining me here on this video. If you could, it really help me out if you just want to share this with your friends for a chance to win this model. As I always announce these each month, and the next competition from the previous video that I did will be announced in my next video. So if you want to share this with your friends, like the video, and remember to be a subscriber as well. But with all that said, I've been Nate the Feral Painter, and I will catch you in the next video.